The crash took only seconds, but it stole everything. When Emily opened her eyes in the hospital, she couldn't feel her legs. The doctor said she was lucky to be alive, but she didn't feel lucky. Her mansion, once full of laughter and parties, had turned into a prison of silence and pity. Her husband stopped visiting. Her friends stopped calling. Hope stopped existing. Until one day, a new maid arrived. A quiet black woman with a gentle voice and eyes that carried a strange warmth. "Please, ma'am," she said softly, "let me help you." And from that moment, everything began to change. Before we dive deeper, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from and what time is it there right now? I love how far these stories travel. Before the accident, Emily Carter lived a life most people only saw in magazines. She was the wife of billionaire real estate mogul Richard Carter, elegant, admired, and untouchable. Their mansion overlooked the ocean, and every evening the world seemed to bow to their perfection. But behind closed doors, that perfection had cracks. "Richard, can we just have dinner without your phone tonight?" He would glance up, half listening. "You know I can't, Em. Deals don't wait." She smiled politely, but inside she felt invisible, like a trophy polished for display. Still she kept pretending, until that rainy night, when their car spun across the highway and everything went black. When Emily woke, she couldn't move her legs. The surgeon said her spine was damaged, but not beyond repair. Still, weeks turned into months and progress never came. Her husband's patience wore thin, his love thinner. Now their grand home felt like a museum, cold, quiet, and filled with pity. Nurses changed daily, their smiles forced, their sympathy rehearsed. And then one morning Richard arrived with a new maid. "She's temporary," he said flatly. "Don't get too comfortable." Emily looked up. The woman standing in the doorway was young, black, and visibly nervous, holding her hands together like she didn't belong there. Their eyes met. Two broken souls from two different worlds. Neither knew it yet, but this was the moment their lives would collide in ways neither could imagine. At first, Emily barely noticed the new maid. Her name was Grace, quiet, soft-spoken, and always moving with purpose. She didn't talk much, only smiled politely and kept her distance. But Emily couldn't help observing her. The way she hummed gospel tunes under her breath, the way her dark hands moved gently across the glass and marble that filled the mansion. "Grace," Emily said one morning, her voice tired, "you don't have to clean while I'm in the room." Grace hesitated. "I don't mind, ma'am. It helps me think," Richard overheard once and frowned. "Emily, don't get too friendly," he warned. "You never know who these people really are. These people." The words hung in the air like smoke. Emily wanted to speak up, to say it wasn't right, but instead she just looked away. That silence stung her more than she expected. Days passed, and Grace's presence became impossible to ignore. She wasn't like the others. She noticed things. She'd adjust Emily's blanket before being asked, open the curtains just wide enough to let the morning light touch her face. And every evening, when Richard's car disappeared down the driveway, Grace would sit beside her quietly. "Do you ever miss walking?" Grace asked once. Emily smiled faintly. "Every second," Grace nodded, her eyes distant. "My mama used to say, some wounds ain't just in the body. Sometimes you gotta forgive life before it lets you move again." That night, Emily couldn't sleep. Forgive life? What did that even mean? The next morning, Richard came home early and found Grace gently massaging Emily's legs. "What the hell is this?" he snapped. "Who told you to touch her?" Grace flinched, pulling her hands away. "I was just trying to help, sir." "Help? You think you can fix what top surgeons couldn't? Know your place, woman." Emily's chest tightened. "Richard, stop. She wasn't doing anything wrong." He turned to his wife, jaw clenched. "You're letting this maid fill your head with nonsense. Don't forget who you are, Emily. Don't stoop to pity." Grace quietly gathered her things and stepped back. Her face said nothing, but her eyes, calm and steady, said everything. Later that night, Emily called for her. "Grace, please don't leave because of him." Grace shook her head softly. "I've heard worse, ma'am. Men like him been trying to remind me of my place my whole life." Emily's throat tightened. "I'm sorry. For what he said. For all of it," Grace smiled faintly. Don't be sorry. Be honest. From that day on, something shifted. Grace began spending more time with her, reading to her, singing softly when the pain returned. The house that once felt like a prison began to breathe again. But one afternoon, as Grace gently brushed her hand down Emily's leg, Emily gasped. Grace. I felt that. For the first time in months, a spark of life, faint but real, pulsed through her leg. And Grace? She just smiled. Told you, ma'am. Some things medicine can't see. But neither of them knew that tiny spark would soon ignite something far bigger than healing. It would expose secrets this house was never meant to reveal. It happened on a Sunday morning, sunlight pouring through the tall windows, the house unusually quiet. Emily was sitting near the fireplace, her blanket folded neatly across her lap. Grace knelt beside her, gently massaging her legs the way she always did, slow, careful, almost prayerful. Then suddenly Emily gasped, Grace! I felt that again. Grace looked up, startled. Where, ma'am? My toes. I can move them. Tears welled in Emily's eyes as her foot twitched, small but undeniable. Grace covered her mouth, whispering, Thank you, Lord. But before they could even breathe, the front door slammed open. Richard stormed in, his voice echoing through the hall. What is going on here? He saw Emily's trembling leg, and Grace's hands still resting gently on it. His face twisted in rage. What did you do to her? He shouted. Did you drug her? Are you trying to scam us? Emily shook her head, her voice cracking. Richard, she helped me. I can feel my legs again. Don't be ridiculous, he snapped. You're confused. And you, he pointed at Grace, you're fired. Pack your things before I call the police. Grace stood up slowly, her eyes steady. You can call whoever you like, sir. I didn't take anything from you. I just gave something back. Richard stepped closer, his voice venomous. You think a maid like you gets to touch my wife and take credit for a miracle? You people never know when to stop pretending. The words hit harder than any slap. Emily froze, not from fear, but realization. She had spent years letting his cruelty pass, but not this time. Enough, Richard, she said through tears. She saved me, not you. She showed me more kindness in weeks than you have in years. Richard stared at her, speechless. The silence stretched until he turned and walked out, slamming the door behind him. Grace looked down, her hands trembling. I didn't mean to cause trouble, ma'am. Emily smiled through her tears. You didn't, Grace. You just reminded me what it means to feel alive. And in that quiet, broken room, where hatred had just stormed out, hope finally took its first breath. Weeks passed, and the house that once echoed with silence began to fill with new sounds, laughter, conversation, even music. Emily's recovery was slow, but it was real. Each day she regained a little more strength, a little more freedom. But it wasn't just her legs that were healing. It was something deeper. One afternoon, as Grace folded laundry, Emily rolled closer and said quietly, You didn't just help me walk, Grace. You helped me see. Grace smiled, shaking her head. You always could see, ma'am. You just had to open your eyes. Word of Emily's recovery spread fast. Reporters, doctors, even neighbors came asking questions. Some called it a miracle. Others whispered that it was impossible, that the maid must have done something strange. The same people who praised Emily's recovery couldn't accept the hands that made it possible. When a journalist asked Grace how she did it, she simply replied, with kindness. Something we all have, but not everyone chooses to use. Emily watched as the world reacted, some inspired, some threatened. She realized that healing wasn't just physical. It was about facing the truths you've been too afraid to see. She had spent years surrounded by privilege, blind to the pain of those who served her, of those her world overlooked. So she made a decision. She set up a foundation, not in her name but in Grace's, to support underpaid caretakers, nurses, and domestic workers who lived in the shadows of the wealthy. When Richard tried to come back, she didn't even open the door. Grace, she said one morning, standing on her own for the first time, you didn't just give me back my legs. You gave me back my soul. And maybe that's the real miracle, not the healing itself, but who it came from. Because sometimes the hands the world looks down on are the ones holding it up. So what would happen if we finally started seeing each other for who we are instead of what we look like?